All right, good evening. The time is 7:03. I'd like to call to order the March 26, 2024 Hampstead School Board Organizational Meeting. At this time, I'd ask Melissa Post to please take the roll.
Okay, thank you. Melissa Denton.
Here.
Richard Poore.
Here.
David Smith.
Here.
Andy Cabarrus.
Here.
Carl Hubner. Here. And our Pinkerton Student School Board member, Shannon Caffell. Here. Thank you, Shannon. And also seated at the board table is Superintendent of Schools, Bob Thompson, and CFO, Jeff Dowd.
All right, at this time, I'd ask for everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Smith, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Do that. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, at this time, we will entertain nominations for Hampstead School Board Chair. So at this time, are there any nominations for School Board Chair?
Yes, I would like to nominate Mr. Andre Cabarrus as the chair.
Do I have a second?
I will second that.
Seconded, okay, seconded by Dr. Hubner. Are there any other nominations for School Board Chair? All right, seeing no other nominations at this time, I'll turn it over to Melissa, who can take the roll.
Okay. Ms. Denton.
Yes.
Rich Poore.
Yes.
David Smith.
Yes.
Andy Cabarrus.
Yes.
Carl Hubner.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Congratulations,
Congratulations.
Thank you.
The meeting is yours, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll just say I'm excited for this year and look forward to, contributing to the best of my abilities to my community. So thank you all. All right. So next we are going to vote on a vice chair. So I'll call for any nominations for vice chair.
I'll nominate Dr. Carl Hubner for vice chair.
I will second that. Are there any other nominations for the vice chair? Okay.
Ready for roll call?
Ready for roll call.
All right. Ms. Denton.
Yes.
Mr. Poore.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Cabarrus.
Yes.
Dr. Hubner. Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay. At this point, we will look for recommendations for school council. So I will be looking for a recommendation to allow the superintendent or designee to seek legal counsel when necessary and with the law firm most appropriate.
I'll make that motion.
Great, thank you. At this point, I'll be looking for...
Give me a vote.
Oh, those in favor?
Thank you. Motion passes.
Next, I'll be looking for a recommendation for school board clerk for Melissa Post. She continues to do a great job and keep us all on task, specifically me.
Second.
All in favor?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
And next, I will be looking for a recommendation for the New Hampshire School Board Association delegate. So every year we nominate a delegate for the New Hampshire School Board Association, and they basically go up to Concord and work with that group to learn about what they're working on, what they're talking about, and they bring that information back to us. So it's a purely volunteer position. Sometimes it goes to people that are brand new on the board. Dr. Hubner did a great job doing it last year, so I'll open the floor up, anyone that wants to volunteer for that. Excellent.
You're volunteering? Okay. Good.
Great. And we don't. Excellent. All right, next is the bonding of the school district officer. So I'll be looking for a recommendation to bond the treasurer as required by statute and Department of Revenue Administration regulations. And a second.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Thank you.
Next, the designation of bank depository. So I'll be looking for a recommendation to appoint TD Bank as the district bank, which is who we have used in the past.
Second.
All in favor? Next, the annual policies and procedures. So you should have 3 different policies in your packet. The first one is policy DFA, to be reviewed annually per the RSA and the auditor. The next one is the risk management policy EI, to be reviewed per the advice of legal counsel. And the next is controls over expenditure of funds procedure. So go ahead and take a look at those.
Make the motion. I don't even think, do we have to do a motion on this, Melissa?
It's not required.
Okay. Never mind. I won't
Right.
make a motion.
Moving on. Next is the scheduling of regular meetings, dates and times. So I will be looking for a recommendation to hold school board meetings on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of each month at 7 p.m. at the Hampstead Middle School as presented in the 2024-2025 proposed meeting schedule.
So moved. I'll second that, just so we can get to discussion. The superintendent has recommended to remove one of our meetings that we typically have. Just think, just for the public, it's on October 1st. I don't know, Ms. Thompson, if you want to speak to why you're recommending that?
Yeah, if you look at the school board schedule for the month of October, we essentially have a meeting every Tuesday. We have traditionally not held that first Tuesday. We've sort of blocked it off. One, it provides the administration just the additional time that's often needed. That's a very tight budget window to have everything ready for that October 1st deadline. The other piece too is we just traditionally, since I've been here, we've not held that meeting. And I just thought, let's maybe take it off the schedule, knowing that the board has the authority to add a work session, an additional special meeting, should we choose to do that in August or September of next year.
And then, so Ms. Thompson, so the 8th would be the first meeting that is presented to the school board, correct, as a starting point? And then the following meeting on the 15th is when we do our typical work session here in the library?
Yeah, essentially that first meeting, that October 8th meeting would just be a real sort of larger general overview to talk about some of the budget constraints or budget issues. And then the work session, we would refine and finalize some of that.
Excellent. All right. So again, I'll be looking for a recommendation. Accept.
I'll make the motion to accept as provided in our packages.
All those in favor?
Right?
Next is the signing of the ethics statement, policy BCA. Policy BCA requires the board to sign ethics statements on an annual basis. Copies are included in your packet for signature and SAU filing.
Passing these down to you, Melissa.
Yes, I'll take them, please. Thank you.
I don't think I realized you were left-handed. Oh, yeah. Evil. Used to tie people's hands behind their back for that.
So, did you just hand the first
Yeah,
page?
yeah.
Thank you, board members.
All right. So are there any other questions or comments from the board before we adjourn this meeting?
Long live the chair. Long live the chair.
So at this point, I will call for a motion to adjourn the meeting, or we can simply adjourn the meeting without voting.
It's the chair's preference.
We will. What's your preference? Would you like to vote to adjourn the meeting or just adjourn the meeting?
I'd say just adjourn.
Okay. We will adjourn the meeting at 7:15 p.m.
Nice job.
All right. At this point, we will start our regular school board meeting on Tuesday, March 26th, 2024 at 7:15 p.m. Melissa, will you take the roll call, please?
Sure. Melissa Denton.
Here.
Richard Poor.
Here.
David Smith.
Here.
Andy Cabarrus.
Here.
Carl Hebner. Pinkerton Student School Board Member Shannon Caffell. Thank you, Shannon. Also seated at the board table, Superintendent of Schools Bob Thompson, CFO Jeff Dowd.
Right. In your packets, you have the meeting minutes from our regular meeting from February 13th, 2024. So if you will go ahead and review those, and I'll be looking for a motion to accept those meeting minutes.
I'll make the motion to accept meeting minutes from the February 13th, 2024 meeting.
All those in favor?
Okay, we have 3 in favor.
Sorry, what was that?
We have 3 in favor, I believe. Can I see the hands again?
All those in favor?
That should be 3.
Okay.
And you say
4 in
how many
favor.
abstain?
And anyone abstaining? Okay, abstaining.
1 abstention. Ms. Denton, how are you voting?
Abstaining.
Abstain. Abstain. That wasn't at the meeting.
2 abstentions and 3 in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. At this point, I'd like to allow for any public comment. Anyone would like to come up?
Typically, you ask Melissa if there's anybody that's submitted.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Melissa, is there anyone that let you know that they wanted to speak?
No, Chairman, I did check with the audience before, and there was no one here for public comments. Is that correct, everybody? Okay, there are none tonight.
Great, thank you. All right, now we'll move on to school highlights, starting with Dr. Cheney.
All right. Okay, I'm on now. Good evening, everyone.
Things are going well at the central school. We are in that sweet spot in the school year. The kids have settled in, the real learning is happening right now, and the kids are just learning so much. These winter months are some of my favorite. Our enrollment has continued to grow this year, primarily in the area of preschool as well as first grade. We currently have 479 students enrolled at HCS. At the end of January, the teachers participated in our second data week of the 23-24 school year. Teachers reviewed benchmark data from both Acadience and iReady, as well as their classroom data. This year in the fall, we started our What I Need groups, and those groups were modified based on the data, and our second full school intervention cycle began in February. Following April break, we will have a third data week where we will look at classroom data and progress monitoring data, as we won't have an additional benchmark at that time, but then we'll enter into our final intervention cycle for the school year. I'm really excited to share with you our One School, One Book program. We just kicked that off, and this year's novel is Wish Tree by Katherine Applegate. We're in our third week of reading, and students are really enjoying the book, both at school and at home. Each week, Mrs. Cameron does trivia questions, and classrooms are doing accompanying activities. Miss Lee's first grade actually started to illustrate the story while she read aloud, and I have copies of the text for each of you here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope that you'll join us in reading this book for the next few weeks. We'll have a parent night on May 1st, where we'll have a family event at the Central School, and you're of course welcome to join us for that as well.
There's also a quiz in a couple of weeks, so just be prepared for that.
We've had 2 more Lunch Buddy events since my last visit with you. At each of these events, we've had about 40 parents attend. Our final event that is already scheduled for this school year is April 9th. So if families are interested in coming, they do need to be a vetted volunteer. And if people have questions, feel free to reach out or call the school, and we're happy to help with that process. In February, we celebrated our 100th day of school. This is a really important milestone for our young learners. They celebrate all the learning that they've done to date, as well as look forward to the learning to occur for the rest of the year. I had the opportunity on that day to spend some time in Mrs. Lazaro's second grade classroom, where they learned all about the number 100, and each center had to do with the number 100, which to an 8-year-old is a really big deal. And it was a lot of fun. We've hosted 2 parent evenings this spring for families of incoming kindergartners and incoming preschoolers. During these evenings, families learned about our programs. They had an opportunity to tour the building, meet their new parent colleagues, and have their questions answered. Registration for the fall is now open, and parents will be notified of their kindergarten placement in May. At this evening, parents were given paperwork to fill out. Paperwork is due by April 19th. If anybody in the public still needs that paperwork, please reach out. Happy to send that along, so that way we can best meet the needs of the families between full and half-day kindergarten. It's really exciting when I get to talk about the great work that our teachers are doing. Mrs. Prue, one of our second grade teachers, had the opportunity to present at the New Hampshire School Administrators Association's Unconference. Mrs. Prue presented about the work that she's done with the Friends program in hosting our Foster Grammys. This year we have 4 Foster Grammys at HCS supporting our first and second grade students, and Mrs. Prue was able to share that wonderful work with the larger educational community. Mrs. Mahoney, one of our preschool teachers, also had an opportunity to present. She presented at the Universal Design for Learning Network meeting, and she shared about how she incorporates UDL, Universal Design for Learning principles, into early childhood education. It's gotten buzz, and other districts are calling to get more information about the work she's doing, so she's really doing some great work. We've been busy with assessments as well at the mid-year. HCS was selected to participate in NAEP testing. This is part of the nation's report card, and about 50 of our 4th graders were selected to participate in this. These results Children don't get their individual results, but they are aggregated into the larger state of New Hampshire to show an indicator of how education is going in New Hampshire and across the country. Our 3rd and 4th graders also participated in the New Hampshire SAS Writing Assessment. Normally that's given in May, but this year, due to a change in scoring, they were administered the test here in March. The students will participate in both reading and math later on this spring. We were really excited to welcome a therapy dog to HCS last week. Miss Lana was there, and she was able to visit with some of our students between grades preschool through grade 4. She met about 40 children while she was there, and the children loved interacting with her. It was neat to watch them. She was in my office, and it was so neat to watch them just, well, smile when they walked into my office, for one, but to be really relaxed and happy to be there. So a big thank you to Michelle Crissa, Julie Barbick, Melissa Clay, and Jess Parsons, who made that experience possible for our students. And finally, our Destination Imagination team that has students from both grades 3 and 4 participated in the regional tournament at Souhegan High School in early March. Their team name is called the Illuminating Skittle Squad, and they participated in an engineering design challenge called Going the Distance. The team placed 4th out of 6 teams and has been invited to the States. Are there any questions?
Dog, and it's somebody that did Destination Imagination 35 years ago. It's awesome that that's still going.
Yes, they love it.
I got a couple questions. Lunch buddies? I know we only did a few, was it 3 events, 4 events this year?
4 events this year,
Are we
yeah.
going to open it up to more next year?
It's been really successful so far, so my team will take back some data afterward. We'll talk with the teachers that have been on duty, the staff that have been on duty, as well as some of the anecdotal feedback. Parents have been really great about emailing after these events about their appreciation and how much they've enjoyed these opportunities.
Yep.
And then we'll start to look at what next year could look like.
Okay. And maybe this is a question for you and Mrs. Mulberry. So, but we have the eclipse coming up.
We do.
Can you speak to what is being planned at Central School, and maybe if Ms. Mulberry is able to say anything, if anything, at middle school? Because I know it's later in the day for middle school, but can you just speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So the eclipse, the peak of the eclipse is happening right at the time we would be traditionally dismissing students, right at that like 3:28 spot. So Mrs. Tomaselli has been working with our science committee and making sure that there are partnerships between HMS and HCS. So some HMS students are, do you mind? Okay, they're preparing some activities for our students, and a group is going to come down and do an assembly for our students as well prior to the eclipse. On the actual day of, we are delaying dismissal by about 15 minutes until 3:40 in the afternoon, so that way we can participate in this event with our students. Eclipse glasses will be provided to all the students. If you're a vetted volunteer, I am looking for volunteers to support that as well. And so we'll head out about 3:25, enjoy the eclipse, pack up, and then head out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so at the middle school, in addition to the students who are really excited for the planning to go down to the central school and share their knowledge with the central school, we will be having, it will be after school here.
Right.
We will be having an after-school viewing party, if you will, and parents will be receiving permission slips to allow their students to stay after school, where they'll also have the opportunity to use the glasses, view the eclipse, and have a gathering, some activities and refreshments
Okay.
with the eclipse viewing. So we're really excited. There's quite a bit going on. Mrs. Tomaselli has been instrumental in organizing that with our science teams, so
Okay.
it's been great.
Are we doing anything for the parents that are traditionally in pickup line with their students?
So I am happy, let me make sure I have enough. Yeah, all right, I'm happy to provide glasses for them, and they are welcome to step out and to view the eclipse from that
Got it.
place. And again, if they're vetted volunteers, park the car for a minute and come on over and join us.
Thank you.
Dr. Cheney, I had a question about the assessments, so the NAEP testing and the SAS testing. So I know the students or the families won't be able to see their individual scores, but do we as a district receive the scores just to see how we're comparing to other districts in the state?
My understanding is we just received state level data. I'm going to look to Nicole for that. For NAEP, yeah.
Yes, we do not have
Okay.
We'll just get New Hampshire scores and know that our students are part of that. For the New Hampshire SAS scores, students will get individual scores, but due to the hand scoring, we do anticipate that the ELA composite score will be quite a bit later than normal.
Got it. Thanks. And I'll just comment, first, I had a blast reading The Wish Tree with my kids. It's an awesome book. And then lastly, just commenting, I had the pleasure of attending the Destination Imagination convention, and it was just bustling with students. So awesome to see. My daughter was part of the Illuminating Skittle Squad, but I also had the pleasure of seeing the middle school team go. And it was really cool to see it, at an older level and how well they represented our town, and it was just really awesome to see kids collaborating in that way.
Great.
All right.
Thank you
Dr.
very
Cheney.
much.
And now, we will be looking for an update from Shannon Caffell on Pinkerton.
All right, so the boys basketball team won the championship. The girls made it to the finals, and they fought pretty hard, but they did lose. Unified basketball, on the other hand, they destroyed the boys varsity team. They raised $400 for New Hampshire Make-A-Wish. The National Honor Society hosted a family paint night. Tomorrow, juniors will take the SATs, freshmen and sophomores will take the PSATs, and seniors will enjoy Senior Palooza. Pinkerton players performed the Addams Family this past weekend. Catwalk for a Cause, sponsored by Astros United, is this Thursday, March 28th in the Stockbridge Theater. The money is going towards mental health initiatives at Pinkerton Academy and in our surrounding communities. And we've also had some therapy dogs at Pinkerton. We've had Luna for about 2 months, and now we're just getting Lucy, so our second therapy dog, and they're so adorable. Spring sports tryouts are done, and games will start within the next few weeks. The new building is still on schedule, surprisingly, even with all this weather, and construction of the 3rd floor is almost done. Astrothon, the only overnight fundraiser at Pinkerton, is April 6th to 7th, and it's to raise money for Boston Children's Hospital. And that's all I have.
Great. Thank you so much. Right. Any questions or comments for Shannon?
Nope, thank
Okay.
you.
Moving on, we'll have Aaron Milbury come on up to talk about the HMS movie project trailer.
Hi there. So I would like to welcome 8th graders Elena Saad and Ali Beliveau to the podium with me. I'm going to let them do most of the talking. The 8th grade just had a chance to do a project after culmination of the horror genre that they were studying in language arts. So they're going to tell you about the project, and then you're going to have the ability to view one of the trailers. So
Excellent.
I think so.
Hello, I'm Ali Beliveau.
And I'm Elena Saad.
We will be explaining, like she just said, what we did as our final project in our movie trailer / horror suspense genre unit. To start off, we had to start off with a process of how to make a movie trailer. We started by watching horror trailers and viewing how the suspense was related in the horror trailers. Then we got sheets of papers that explained how much suspense was in a horror trailer.
Once we were done with that, we had the opportunity to pick out our members for our team. You had an option to pick people from outside of school if you were best friends with them or family. Next thing you were have to do, you had to make a storyboard, and the storyboard was based off your scenes from your script.
Then you began to film your movie trailer project. You could film it at your house, you could film it at the school, and it didn't really matter. You just had to film it and have it done by a certain date. Then you began to edit it by using whatever app you wanted to use to edit all the trailers together. You must have had, I think it was 8 suspense things in, I think you had to have 8 different kinds of suspense in your movie trailer.
We presented the movie trailer at the Project Aurora night with families.
What I see over the project being 8th grade me, I saw how it helped students have opportunities to be creative and to explore more in ELA and be able to talk to new people and see other people trying to do projects. And I saw it as a learning experience and really fun.
But question, what did we like about it and why?
You just answered it.
Something we would like to add is that this project gave a lot of opportunities to kids to be creative and to them to have fun. And like we never had projects like this before, so it was really like kind of unique, and hopefully we will have like opportunities like this in the future in high school.
Do you need to give any bit about your trailer before we show it? Do they need to know anything about? This is Elena's trailer that is going to be shown.
Okay. So when I first found out we were having a trailer, I was actually so excited. So like the first thing that came up in my mind, she like said like, you guys can pick anyone, and I was like, anyone? So I came up to her at the end of the class and I asked her if I can have my family do it with me. So my cousins with the curly hair, they're in it, and then I asked my 2 best friends, Cole and Stella, to join me with it. So that was really fun.
Awesome.
That's an element.
Should we dim the lights? Joe's running to give us audio.
Yeah, to go.
Yeah, you guys know. So basically, Alyssa cheated on Jack with William, and so like, Jack and Linda. Yeah, you guys know him. And William ended up winning the fight, of course, because like. Yeah, he's. Guys, I think it's getting a little late. I think we should go home. Yeah, my mom wanted us home back at 8, so same. Bye. All right. Bye, guys. Bye. Bye, Mayor. Bye, Cole. What is that? What do you mean she's gone? Looks like something really strange going on.
Locals say this is the worst thing that has ever happened to Hampstead. We can only infer that these missing people have simply run away, but the locals say there's something more sinister about it. Lock your doors. Stay inside. Be prepared to fight for your own life.
I will adventure. No matter what cost, I'm going to find whoever did this. Who are you? What do you want to do with my friends? Who are you? What? How is that even possible? You're supposed to be dead!
Well done.
Do you have any questions we can bring them back up if anyone has questions for them? I didn't prep them for that, but I think they're up for the task. No?
No questions. I'll just say, first, I know it's not easy to get up in front of that podium. It takes a lot of courage. So, awesome job getting up there and being brave enough to share your project with us. It's great. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time.
Great. Nice job, girls. Thank you.
All right. And Principal Milbury, you will also be giving us an update on the HMS lacrosse program.
I will. We are excited that we have 25 students trying out for boys and 25 students trying out for girls. That started today. We had a little bit of a delay. Mrs. Benson has said it more than once to me. I jinxed us and said what wonderful weather we had last week, and then the weekend happened. But we're in good shape with lacrosse. They've been able to buy the new uniforms, the padding for the soccer goals that are out there. We've been having lots of conversations about the field usage, and Mrs. Benson is working closely with the coaches to ensure that practice time as much as possible is happening off of the playing field so that it's not in really rough shape after the lacrosse season. For soccer, I had some soccer players say something to me today, lacrosse is gonna wreck our field, and I said, no, it's okay. So they'll use the field minimally. You know, they'll have to use it a little bit just in terms of spacing so that when they're getting ready for games, they have an awareness of the space of the field. But for the most part, the practices will happen off of the playing surface so that we can keep it in as good a shape as possible. Yeah, we were able to hire the coaches for it. We have 2 coaches for our girls team and 1 coach for our boys team. And they're really excited to get started, and the kids are excited too. It's fun to see a whole new set of equipment bags come in today. Those lacrosse stick bags are pretty big. So today was the first day of that. And I don't know if anyone has any questions about lacrosse.
No, knowing both the boys and the girls coaches personally, you got some stellar coaches. So
Fantastic. I don't know a lot about lacrosse, so I'm excited to learn more about it. I consider myself a very into sports person, but lacrosse is one I know the least about. So it'll be excited, and the kids are excited to teach us.
So who are the coaches?
one of them I know is Sydney Derry, coached girls lacrosse for a number of years, coached basketball most recently, and then
Steve Whalen.
Steve,
Is it Steve?
spacing on the last name. I coached his daughter in lacrosse. Steve Wallen. There we go.
Wallen.
There we go. Thank you. Just want to say
And
thank
Maria
you.
Johnston is helping Sydney Derry.
Got it. Just want to say thank you to them. That's amazing for the inaugural season to get someone to step up. So definitely appreciate that very much.
Yeah, and again, I mean, kudos to all the people that came together to help make that happen. So, and it, you know, I think the golf team may have lost a couple of people due to lacrosse, but otherwise our baseball, softball numbers stayed where they needed to be, and lots of track students running track too. So for a small community to have this many spring offerings and have good numbers is pretty incredible. Bye, thank you.
Thank you all again.
Thank you.
So.
Right. Next, Principal Milbury will be asking for the acceptance of a donation.
Thank you. So I had a community member reach out and express a desire to make a donation to cover a student's trip to Washington, D.C. And so I would like to ask for the acceptance of the generous donation by Rebecca Fouth for $1,059, which is the entire cost of one student's trip, and really, really appreciate it. It's a very generous donation.
All right. So I guess we'll vote on that. I'll be looking for a motion to accept the donation for $1,059.
I'll make the motion.
And looking for a second.
I will second that.
Nicely done.
Nice, Rich.
Yep.
All those in favor? All right.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And please
Next.
extend our thank you to the donator.
We will.
Thank-
Absolutely. Thank you.
Next, we'll have Dr. Cheney up to also look for acceptance of a donation.
Yes. So I'm asking for your acceptance of a $750 donation this evening from the Mothers Club to support a summer tuition for a student.
I'll be looking for a motion to accept the $750 from the Hampstead Mothers Club. All those in favor?
Thank you.
And thank you to the Mothers Club. It's very generous.
Right. And Superintendent Thompson. you're
Yes,
going to present.
so just a donation update. So just for the public's knowledge, Hampstead School Board Policy KCD is public gifts and donations. And in its present form, any donation over $500 requires approval of the board. Anything under $500 can be approved by the superintendent. But the board has indicated that they would just like to be made aware of those donations that are under $500. So I do have a couple. One is a donation to our robotics program for $150. That is for the Hampstead Central School Robotics Program. And then the other one is a $50 donation to our school lunch program. So again, does not require approval of the board, but always good to know about the generosity of community members. So.
It's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you to those who donated. All right. Next are the election results review. So for the school board 3-year terms, we had both Rich Poor and Melissa Denton. So congratulations on joining the board.
Congrats.
Great to have you.
Andy, we typically let them say a couple of things.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Anything you'd like to say as we welcome you to the board?
I'm excited to be on the board and do good things for our town.
Great.
Like that.
You know. We're very happy to have you.
Yes, welcome.
Welcome, both of you.
All right. Number 2, as far as what was voted on, the operating budget passed, 919 votes to 496. The Capital Reserve Fund passed with 887 votes to 521. Number 4, the Hampstead Central School 2 infill classrooms passed with 980 votes with 441 no votes. And then the general acceptance of reports was 1,211 with 183. That passed as well. Any questions or comments?
I would just like to say a huge thank you to the 980 people that voted yes for the 2 classrooms, as well as the 887 people who voted for the Capital Reserve to replenish that so we can continue that momentum. And overall, I want to say thank you to everybody that came out and voted, whether you voted yes or no. It's great to see people voting. We definitely wish we saw more coming out to vote, as we did not have, I think we had less than 20% of the town, but whatever we can do to instill a little bit of energy next year to get more people out would be great. And a well thought out vote for the 2 of you against your proponents there. So, nice job.
I'll echo Dave's sentiments. I think this is a huge step toward progress for our community, but I'll say the work isn't done. So with the preschool and kindergarten projections, our existing elementary school class sizes and population, and the growing need for special ed services, the 2 classrooms won't solve all of our problems, but it is a positive step toward progress. So I'd like to just commend Dave, Aaron, and Jay for their multi-year work on this project, as well as everyone in the community who attended walkthroughs, did their research, shared their findings with others and spread the word. And then lastly to Superintendent Thompson and CFO Dowd for basically assisting us as a board with finding the most cost-effective, fiscally responsible solution for our district.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on. Superintendent Thompson, you are going to give us an update on the 2 Cove addition plan.
Yeah, and I feel like this is a little bit of a historic moment because any update that I've previously given over the last couple of years has been about a proposal, and will it pass? What will this look like if voters approve it? And here we are with a project. So in your board packet, we have a preliminary schedule for the work to be completed for the 2 infill classrooms. This is hot off the presses. We literally received it from the project manager yesterday. And I do want to just throw that caveat out there that it's a preliminary schedule. And not only that, it's a draft schedule. It will be subject to change. In fact, we do have some feedback that we will be providing to the project manager. It's exciting to look at the schedule to see that the work begins next Friday on April 5th. And I know some people at home, especially people who work at the central school, their anxiety might be rising a little bit to think that the project starts next Friday. Let me assure you, a lot of the preliminary work is done in an office. It's not done on site. So just because the project begins on next Friday doesn't mean that they'll be breaking ground. The schedule calls for the on-site work to begin on May 27th, the week of May 27th. That's actually Memorial Day, is that 5/27. And I won't go through the whole schedule because, again, it's preliminary, it's a draft, it's subject to change. But when they do begin, the work that will begin will be work to the exterior metal cladding. Then obviously a significant portion of the work will take place over the summer months when school's not in session. When we return for the start of the 24-25 school year, the company will be in the project of roof edge gravel stop, windows, rough plumbing, rough mechanical, and as well as other projects to complete the major work. The schedule that we received has the project wrapping up. The punch list has everything wrapping up on October 15th, which is even more aggressive than the original timeline they gave us, which had us sometime in November. So again, I'd caution us, these things are subject to change based upon the availability of materials, based upon access to labor. So it would be our intent to update the board as frequently as possible as far as how the project will be going. So again, we have a project manager, and their job really is to work with the contractor to identify subcontractors that will work on the job, manage the contract, manage the finances, and our project manager will work very closely with CFO Dowd, who will be the liaison for the school district during the construction project. So I'll entertain any questions that folks may have, knowing that we're still waiting for additional information that should be coming shortly.
A couple of things I see on the schedule. Just one, I'm enthused that we do have it already. This project plan, so it's amazing. It's really great to see. I know a lot of thoughts going into this. For the public, there is a bid period that starts on Monday, April 8th, and they're compiling that by the 10th of May. So I'd like to know, probably for the next board meeting, because we'll be in the middle of it, but how are we getting this information out to local contractors? What all are we doing? Is it being posted in the newspaper? Are we posting things around town? How are we getting that word out?
So I'll defer to Bob on that for the ultimate answer, but experience tells us that the last time that we had a construction project with this firm, I don't think that we were as transparent in putting that bid notice out. We are not going through our typical bid process. This is all handled on a very technical level through BPS.
Correct.
I would like to have a blast out on public communication from us indicating what the steps are when the bidding process begins and what the steps are to become qualified to be able to.
Because I know that in the last time we had a local contractor that actually bailed us out. Yeah. So I'm hoping we're going to reach out to them specifically to say, hey, this is there, but also how can we get the word out? So I'd like to get that information as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I think that what we realize is it's a different process and it's not as transparent as going onto our website and seeing those bids. those are all handled through GP.
No, but I think we could do some things like send the email out to parents, right? Start that, both the HCS and HMS parents. I think that we can post things at the town, ask the town to blast that out. I think we could use the communication committee a little bit more that's in the town.
Even on our website, I think it's a great observation.
What's that?
I said even on our website. you get
Just,
notices
that's
out
what I'm
there.
saying, like any and every way, this is pretty cheap, easy ways to do things. If we're going to put something in the newspaper also, I'm not sure, that's, but what other things can we do to get local contractors, keep it as local as possible?
Yeah.
And, we've heard that feedback and have provided that to the project manager, but we'll follow back up to identify what the process is for selection and make sure we get that information out to the public. Because again, we want to use local contractors to the greatest extent possible for a lot of this work. They have skin in the game.
Yep. And I'm assuming it's Keith that's going to be the point of contact from BPS, correct?
That is correct. As far as we've been made aware at this point.
All right. Can we send that contact information to the board members so we can get the word out as well? I think it's upon all of us to do that,
Yep,
not just
absolutely.
asking you all.
Yep.
Okay. The next thing I want to say is just, I know we've got 2 team members here that will be affected at HCS, but just want to say thank you to the teachers, the paras, the admin that's going to be affected by this, by the noise and how they're going to work around this. I know that when we did the renovation, there was a little disruption there, understandably so. In the greater good, it's great that we're going to do this, but I think in this time, there's more people that are going to be impacted because we've talked about, and I don't know if you're ready to talk about that today or not, Ms. Thompson, but possibly displacing some rooms because we're losing some rooms per se for a couple days or for a few months. Do you want to speak to that at all, or?
I'll speak to that. Actually, I'm going to defer to Dr. Cheney, who can speak on that.
Okay. Because I just think it's good to get that information out now so parents know.
I would agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So during construction, we're going to be losing our access to 2 of the abutting classrooms for the duration of the project. Those right now house a 2nd grade classroom and a special education classroom. To best meet the needs of the students in the entire building, the plan right now is to move the 2nd grade class up to the back of the library. Next year, we're going to be adding another 3rd grade, and that classroom will be in the front of the library, ready to take on the new addition room when that's open. And then the 2nd grade classroom, the 4th grade classroom that I'm displacing by the back of the library will be moving into the art room until the construction is completed.
Right. Can you talk to what's going to happen with the existing librarian and what we're going to do to, I'd say, continue the education through library and one of our favorite areas in the entire district, the art room with the fabulous Mr. Torelli?
Absolutely. So both of those teachers have been wonderfully flexible and accommodating and understanding of the need to accommodate classrooms during the construction time, and both will be visiting classrooms and pushing right into the classroom for their services. That will change the nature of the services. Art, for example, would be hard-pressed to bring clay into a classroom or a large paint job to do those beautiful murals that we know Mr. Torelli does in a classroom setting. So those will have to be on hold until after the project is completed. Okay. For the librarian, we are looking at many spaces in which to house the books. This year, she already goes into some classrooms to deliver her lessons. She'll continue that next year for the entirety of the building during construction. And then students can perhaps order books, or maybe she'll bring a selection of books. We're still working out some of those details.
Okay. And we're talking 6 weeks-ish, right? From the start of school through, right now 10-15, give or take a few days?
We are. And you can look at this schedule several different ways and look at it and say, wow, that doesn't seem like a long period of disruption. But I go back to my year 1 here, where we were doing the 60s renovation and the summer ended and we were kind of finishing things up. And we were told by the contractor, like in good faith, like, oh, the disruption is over. That wasn't true. There still was a disruption. Teachers were reporting disruption. Mm-hmm. I get to hear it myself, largely like backup alarms on a construction vehicle. It's very disruptive. So I look at this and I'm optimistic, but then the reality is that Dr. Cheney has a plan for 2 classrooms, but we also are working through a contingency for additional classroom space that is likely to be needed. But right now, we're going to operate off of what we have here in front of us. There's no way to completely mitigate disruption on an active construction site, especially with little kids who are so interested in big trucks and all the things that come with construction.
Yep.
So.
Right.
And the other piece I just want to mention, which seems separate but is not, the individuals who will be working on this project will not come into contact with our staff or students. The construction company has a background check process that they use that is checked every single day. It's actually a pretty rigorous process. I mention this because during the renovation, there was, I hesitate to use the word an issue, but there was something brought to our attention that needed our attention, and I want to be clear that the first conversation I've had with the construction company prior to this project was, how do we protect our staff and students from coming into contact with people who may not have be vetted through our office. So.
All right. All right. Thank you. I just want to say again, thank you, Mr. Torelli. I know you're here by chance, but thank you for being flexible for this. We really appreciate it.
It's not completely done. It's just it's on short term, so it's on its way. We're getting there.
But yeah, and just say again, thank you to the staff. That we know that 6 weeks doesn't sound like a long time, but I don't know if I can stand my kids for 6 weeks at a time. So dealing with kids and the construction, everything else, hats off to you. So thank you.
And Bob, lastly here, I don't know if having not gone through one of these construction projects before as a school board member, if it's at all possible to invite the project manager to attend board meetings periodically just to give us updates, on
Yeah, absolutely.
how things are going, that would be great.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. So.
Excellent. All right. Next, the fixed asset review with CFO Dowd.
In your packets, you will have a listing of, it's on legal size paper, it's a very small document, it says cumulative book asset detailed by depreciation category. So our audit, for as far as I can remember, has had a finding on it or a qualification on the audit opinion based on the fact that we did not have fixed assets on our books. The idea behind a fixed asset is that it is something that you've purchased of a useful life of more than 1 year. So typically in industry and business, we want to make sure that we are able to measure what our actual costs are every year, and therefore fixed assets are very helpful to be able to know how much depreciation we're taking to show what our actual costs are. In the school setting, fixed assets are helpful because we show long-term liabilities on our books relating to various New Hampshire retirement system obligations and other obligations that the district has. And fixed assets are a way to offset that to make our balance sheet as strong as it can be. The problem with fixed assets on the school side is that we typically will buy or acquire property and we don't do anything with it. And as far as fixed assets go in depreciation, when you have a building or renovation, for example, or equipment, vehicle, etc., we're going to go in and depreciate that every year over its useful life. With real property, we don't. So our book value is very low because, for example, we have land at 21 Emerson Ave, which is a central school property, and we've got a valuation on that of $47,000 and $17,000 from the 1920s. So we don't depreciate that, but we don't get the benefit of what the actual fair market value of that property is, which would be substantially higher than that. We took a while to get these on the books because of how old the district is, because of how we came into possession of our assets, which I've had a very difficult time tracing back from a cost perspective. I've been able to since work out an arrangement with our auditors to see what would be acceptable to them, and so what I've done is I've taken on, for example, property that we acquired in 1910 or something, the actual current assessed value, which would represent theoretically a fair market value of the property, and I've just brought that back to all the inflation and all of that. I've just wound it back to the current value at that time and whenever it was in the 1920s, which would be $47,000. We acquired the lot line adjustment with the neighbors next door to us at 17, so I put that on at 17 as well. So these are on our books. It's nothing very exciting. It was much more of a problem on two levels. One of them is actually getting the historic cost for these assets that go so far back, which we've been able to work out and work through. And the other is one that, Andy, you were able to witness. You stopped by the office one day and you were able to witness in our system, in our enterprise system, we had a lot of assets that seemed to just get dumped in like a test mode, or when the system was getting set up there from like 2004, they weren't these assets. Some of them weren't even legitimate assets, but all of them had to be scrubbed out of the database. And it was quite an undertaking. Thousands and thousands of lines had to be updated, made current, and then removed, essentially, because when the assets were put into the system, they were not all set up correctly. So the assets had to be set up correctly. Well, it's set up correctly, but set up with a depreciation schedule and all of that in order for them to actually be taken off the books altogether. Kind of an arduous undertaking. Lisa Grove was tremendous in helping me accomplish that, and I appreciate the board's patience. The fixed assets have been reviewed, and I don't think there are any changes to this. Any audit report that we have in draft form right now, although it really should be final, is clean, and we no longer have any qualification on opinion based on fixed assets alone. So actually not at all whatsoever. So it's good stuff. So fixed assets are a little tricky. They're a little tricky in our municipal and school district sense, but if you have any questions on them, I'm more than happy to entertain them.
Just when are we going to see the latest audit?
They have everything they need from us, literally.
Okay.
We've signed off, Bob and I. I've signed off on the final draft, and Bob and I have signed off on our management representations to them. So
Okay.
I really did expect that we'd have it before the meeting, but we can
Okay.
send it out as soon as, or make it available as soon as it comes in.
Okay.
So it's a very nice, squeaky,
Okay.
clean report, which I like. So
And it was really cool, Superintendent Thompson showed me all the years going back and how they had to track back. So he actually has like the annual reports for, I don't know how far back.
I'm not trying to brag, but I have read the town reports, the school report, going all the way back to 1870. Yeah, and if anyone who's like a history buff or interested in that stuff, I'd be happy to share. It's very interesting, some of the information that they would put in the school report specific to teacher performance and teachers that were able to maintain their classroom well and teachers that were not, or information about head lice or other really specific information that today, under the lens of FERPA and personnel records, would never fly. But anyone who's interested in that, please let me know. I'd be happy to share that.
So Lisa Gove has been very helpful in accumulating those as well for us and kind of creating a library. We've shared that library with the town as well, so that they have access to those reports as well for the ones that they don't already have.
Right. You can pick those up at the Historical Society. Talk to Mr. Morris, and can read like in the 1962 one, where you can read how many kids had cavities.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting.
But what you won't find in that 1962 report, I bet, is how much the 60s wing cost to build. Because I've looked.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's why I had to go for an alternate approach, because going back to the 1920s and before, the head lice, student behavior, all this stuff is in there, but not the actual cost.
Yep. That's
So
fun.
we figured it out, though.
Nicely done. Appreciate that.
Right. So that takes care of the 2022-2023 audit report update. We'll move on to the fiscal year 2024 budget projection.
So in your packet, you'll have a year-end budget actual projection. I won't say a surplus projection. I don't think that's really a fair thing to say, but that's how it's classified. You have it, right? Okay.
I got it somewhere. Yeah, don't worry about it. I was confused by this. The header says 2023. So you meant 2024.
Oh, geez, that's 2024.
That's right. I thought you were giving us historical.
Second time this week I've done
No
that,
worries,
by the
no
way,
worries.
so nothing critical. So when we're looking at a budget, especially for the newer board members, when we're looking at budgets and how we're doing compared to budget, we have to remember that there are two sides to the budget. One is the revenue side, one is the expense side. And so when we look at how we are lining up for the end of the year, we have to look at both of those categories. So we have the expense surplus and the revenue surplus. Under the expense surplus, It looks like we're going to have some favorable variances from salaries, perhaps insurance, FICA. Looks like we're going to be over on professional services and buildings and sites. I'm going to go back to the buildings and sites. I'm going to go through the rest of our list first. So tuition for Pinkerton, it looks like we'll have about a 210 combined, 215,000 combined favorable variance there. So a lot of miscellaneous items, transportation potential for 50,000, mostly based on lack of being able to provide enough buses for us. The buildings and sites. So you see an unfavorable variance there of 114,000. If you look over on the revenue side, you'll see capital reserve, 114,000. So I've listed this on both sides. From a technical perspective, we've been approved by the voters to move forward with the 2-classroom project. So we should be good to go, with the exception that the way that our contracts are set up, we have about 114,000 that is going to be earned by our architects, contractors, and things like that, leading up to July 1st. So basically the work they've done, design work, things like that, those will all be in place before the year starts. So we do have room in the budget. I've included it here as an expenditure, and I would expect that I'll set that up as a receivable from the capital reserve fund, and then next year we'll do a transfer for whatever the actual cost is to cover that from the capital reserve. So it's net, it is a budget. On the expense side, it's an overage. On the revenue side, it'll be a pickup.
Right.
A little strange, but
What are professional services?
it's a lot of our outside consulting for student contractors, yeah, for.
So we put $500,000 more aside, we're still returning $800,000 to the taxpayers?
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
Yep, that would be my estimate. We have something called the fund balance retained or fund balance retention, which for our new board members and even for our existing board members, it's not always a very clear thing. But the fund balance retained is something that this board had elected to do at the end of last year, and that was to hold $500,000 from our unencumbered surplus to make it available during the year should the need arise. There are very specific ways in which we can spend the money, and typically it's when your budget's done, you're out of money, you can go to the fund balance retention, and that will lapse at the end of the year. So between a revenue surplus and an expense surplus, I'd estimate that the gross surplus is $812,000. If the board chooses to maintain a $500,000 fund balance retention, then that 812 is the number. If that fund balance retained, you wanted to do $250,000, then the other $250 would be surplus. If you wanted to do $600,000, then the estimated gross surplus would go down by $100,000. So it's a little confusing, but I did want to make a note of it here.
Yep.
I'll list it out for you. And I'd also like to recognize, since we're here, on the revenue side, one of our largest revenue pickups this year, and we've had some very generous years, but our biggest pickup this year is $74,055, which represents special aid, or also known as catastrophic aid, which is the amount that we received beyond what I had budgeted. So,
Where did that aid come from?
the state.
The state?
Yep. This is aid that is offered by the state to assist the district in meeting its financial obligations of higher need students. And I'd like to thank Jessica and her team for really getting as much of that as we could get. So it's a lot of work. Yes.
Thank you.
So that's it. Are there any questions on
Yeah,
our potential
I've got
position?
kind of a can of worms. Maybe I've had a few people reach out to me because of local news that has happened. It looks like for us, we are the 800,000 above, not the 800,000 below, as another town has. Can you speak to what may have happened there, or can you speak to how we've assured, and we can assure those at home and those that will watch the recording, how it won't happen here? What is it that we're doing to make sure? Because it seems that in that town there was quite the surprise dropped on people, and I want to rest assured the community here, we're not even close to that, and that we're keeping a careful eye. How do we approach it, or how are we approaching it? Whole bunch of questions. So.
And specifically, what I interpreted was that they overestimated revenue. So what are we doing to make sure that we don't overestimate the revenue that we're going to take in?
So I've looked into this, and the more I look into it, the more perplexed I am at the whole situation. They did have an over expenditure in their special education and psychological services line, which exceeded $300,000. This was from some information that had been provided at their school board meeting. But on the flip side, they were showing a $282,000 favorable variance for tuitions at Pinkerton. So yes, they've overspent their budget on a budget line of the $267,000 plus the psychological services, but there's money in another line. So I think maybe it was last month or the month before, I came to the board with some rather large budget transfer requests, which helped to cover instances like that and allow us to make the transfers that we need to satisfy the obligations that we have to be able to continue to track our budget. I don't know. They're overspent $267,000 and another $50,000 on top of that, but the money's there in the budget. So I'm a little confused about that myself. I think that what's important here and I'm not tooting my own horn here in any way, and it's not what you think, but I think that you as a board have seen what having a multi-district SAU provides in terms of support, and that's not always the best. The districts aren't getting the attention that they need, and I think that here in Hampstead, having brought all of that in-house has done us a lot of good because we've been able to take a much harder look at a lot of things. So when I talked about our projections just a short while ago, I mentioned that there's an expense surplus or an expense aspect to the budget and a revenue aspect to the budget. So on the expenditure side, I understand that and we have a purchase order system and a requisition system. And so when someone has a request for something to be paid, we put that into the system and that encumbers the funds so no one else can spend it. It sounds like they had a number of expenses that were incurred, but were not entered into their system. Yeah. So I see, as I mentioned, the $267,000 that their special education was overexpended, but I'm not sure. I'm not.
What that actual number really
Well,
was.
it would be, yeah, because their encumbrances weren't way out of whack, but even, let's assume that they're short, and we're pretty late in the year here, let's assume you're short $200,000. So, as I discussed, the high school tuition and special education almost cancel out. So if let's say you're $200,000 underreported, it's not the end of the world for $200,000. So I don't want to be in that situation. I never want to be in a situation. We always budget, I think, appropriately. We always plan for our reasonable contingencies, and I think the board has done an excellent job at that. I think that we are prepared, if we have a placement or two, to be able to absorb them with no problem.
Okay.
I think that's a lot of what the issue was. And the other side was revenue. And I believe their budget was showing let's say $150,000 in catastrophic aid, special education aid, and it looks like they were due to receive $180,000. Now, I'd heard some rumblings, maybe from one of their meetings, their board chair or someone, and there is a process for tracking those expenses, and there's a process for submitting for those expenses. And it sounded like those expenses were not submitted for in Auburn, and I don't know if that's the case, but they said it's been corrected. They've since been submitted.
Okay.
But the line's only $150,000, $180,000. So if you miss $150,000 in revenue.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's not so much the dollars that what is and isn't there. It's more of what I was hoping to hear, and maybe for another board meeting, we could possibly hear about what I heard. Another area that was on their video from their school board meeting was they weren't maximizing reimbursements. So I think that it might be nice to hear, I see Jess over there, what is our process to maximize reimbursements, and if we can get more of a dollar figure of what that looks like for us. I think it's good to educate not only the board members here of that process, but also how are we tracking in the year for our reimbursements so that people at home understand it's not just about what we spend, but what can we get reimbursed for from state or federal, and what does that process look like? So.
Yeah. And
It's so interesting you say that, because Jessica and I just had this conversation when we heard about the situation in Auburn. And so we will plan to do a pretty deep dive there's essentially 3 revenue sources in special education, and should be prepared. I don't want to put her on the spot, but do you want to talk a little bit about the special education aid process, or do you, okay. And I do think this is important, because this is like the victory lap for the leadership that Jessica's brought to the department, because when a lot of people are headed off on vacation in July, Student Services is not doing that. They are knee-deep in recouping special education costs. So there's a ton of work that's done by the department in July. And then just one last thing is, when IDEA, when the law came into effect in 1975, saying that we would educate children with disabilities, which is the right thing to do, there was a commitment made by the federal government that they would fund 100% of special education. They don't do that.
We're still waiting.
And the funding that we do receive is arduous to get. And I think, Jess, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in the state of New Hampshire, they have changed the name. You'll see it's in the past been catastrophic aid. They've changed
Right.
that to special education aid, which I appreciate that. And so every year, the DOE will set a percentage of which they're going to kind of potentially reimburse you at. And so you have to hit the number, it's somewhere upwards of $60,000. I can get you the exact when I give a more full presentation, but anything over and above a certain amount that we pay, we are due to receive a percentage back of that. But in order to do that, you have to submit every invoice that you pay out for a student. So I'll give you an example. Say we have a student placed in an out-of-district program where the cost is $130,000. And so in order for us to be able to recoup some revenue from that, we need to submit every invoice that we receive. And with those invoices, we also need to submit logs that verify that the students were there on the days that the invoices bill us for. In addition to that, everything on the IEP needs to state the services that are listed on the invoice that we also have the attendance records for. So all of that needs to be verified for every service that the child or the student receives in that program. And so as you can see, throughout a month, we typically are invoiced monthly. The student, depending on how many services they have, we have to kind of upload that piece. Anyway, you can kind of see, and we have around currently 20 students in placements that would that we are able to bill back for. And so we keep a list, a running list of all of our students, and then we go into each of their plans. We look at exactly what services are billable for, and then we keep track on a monthly basis. Have we received that invoice? Have we received the attendance record that goes with that invoice? And then previous to this past year, it was done not on a monthly basis. And so part of that is, as we start to input them into the state system, it will kick back if it doesn't, it's not going to accept the invoice, which allows us extended time to go back to potentially the school and say, hey, can you reword that invoice to make sure that it sounds like the service that's on here, so that we can then go back and bill for it. So it's a pretty complex process, but I have to say, Jordan Stebbins in the Student Services office had no experience before coming here, but we together learned kind of the system and what to input, and beyond just what the state asks for us, we've created our own internal systems to ensure that we're receiving all of the invoices and materials needed to justify in order to bill back for that. And so from there, that is all due on July 30th. And then ultimately what will happen is you'll get your first draft back that says, hey, you need to submit these invoices or some of this stuff doesn't match. And so there's a couple of rounds of that. And then typically by November, Jeff, we'll get how much we're getting back. And we were, I have to say that everything we billed for, in turn, we were able to receive the percentage back from that, because we were able to provide all the accurate documentations to receive the services provided. So that's just one little kind of how we check and balance all of that. But really, a lot of it has to do with making sure that we have really good internal tracking systems so that we can keep track of the things that we need.
Yeah, and I know just a few years ago we had, some challenges, to to say the least, on the reimbursements and some of the paperwork. So appreciate what you and the team have done to get that caught up and, getting the reimbursements all caught up. So definitely appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And I think, for people at home who saw the Auburn story, I wonder, well, could something like that happen in Hampstead? Our budget is constantly monitored in a way that I think if the general public knew, I think that they would, it would bring them some ease to know that
Right.
Jeff and I are talking about our operating budget every single day. And the other thing too is if you were, one of the internal controls that we could utilize if we were getting tight is a freeze. We would freeze the budget. That would stop any expenditures that weren't critical. And we haven't had to do that. So that is a sign. So for folks, if we were to go down a path of a lot of unanticipated expenditures, the budget freeze would be a mechanism that we would put in place to manage the remainder of the school year's budget. And based upon what Mr. Dowd has presented, that is not needed. And it hasn't been needed now in this third year here.
And just for the new board members, typically we ask, Mr. Dowd and Mr. Thompson to bring this type of, let's say, analysis every probably 3 months. So we keep on, monitoring that. And as board members, this is one of our core responsibilities is the budget. So that's why we ask a lot of these questions and, monitor this throughout the month also.
And just for your knowledge, our special ed aid this year was $655,934, which ties to last year's expenses. Last year we received $610,000 as well. So we're doing as good of a job, I think, as we can, chasing down those out-of-district placements and being able to get some reimbursement for them.
So thank you, Jeff. Thank you and the team.
Moving on, we have Mr. Dowd talking about the Joint Loss Management Committee Safety and Health Plan.
Yes, and in your packet, you'll have our safety and health program that has been approved by the Joint Loss Management Committee. This is a document that was previously approved by the committee, but we quickly realized that the state had some additional updates to forms, and we wanted to include those before bringing them to the board. This was approved by the committee on March 14th, and you have it in front of you now to review. This is available publicly on our website. And really the purpose of the Joint Loss Management Committee, it's not a safety committee. It is a committee that really looks out for the health, safety, and welfare of our employees. And in doing so, a lot of times we're looking out for the health, safety, and welfare of our students as well, but that's the purpose of this is really from an employee-based perspective. You'll see that our plan, crisis team, there's a lot in here. There are a lot of the state regulations that I've included, that the committee has included, some information on accident investigations, and probably the jackpot for any of our internal employees is the attachments and the exhibits, which I think start on page 21 or so, 22, so that depending on the type of incident that happens, we have sample forms in. So if we have a workers' comp claim, that might be one thing. If we have an accident involving a student with injuries to staff, that might be a different form. So we have a number of different forms that we use depending on the incident, and all of those are listed. So hopefully it brings a little clarity to the process. We have last but not least on page 35, this is what had been updated by the Department of Ed, and it's, 15 pages or more, the restraint and seclusion reporting form. So anytime we have a restraint or seclusion, this is the form that we would use. So all these are nicely packaged up in our Joint Loss Management Committee safety plan.
Is this similar to what other districts have or?
No, strangely similar.
Okay. And then, can you explain what restraint and seclusion is?
So, are you on page, if you look at page 32, because there are so many questions as to what actually constitute, for example, an injury or restraint or seclusion, the Department of Ed has included some guidance on that, and so I've actually included the definitions of what a facility is, what a restraint is. So a restraint, for example, here is defined as a brief touching or holding to calm, comfort, or encourage, or guide a child so long as the limitations of freedom of movement of the child does not occur. A number of other examples are provided as well. Carl, I didn't ask you to ask that question. That's a question that I think a lot of people have questions on, so why not just include the definitions and get it over with? So we're all talking the same language.
Yep.
So the seclusion would be like a pull-down room for the student that's elevated. How often ballpark student strangers
For our superintendent.
Yeah, and I would direct that question to our Director of Student Services.
And Dr. Humner, I'm not sure your microphone's working, so I'm not sure if people at home heard your question.
Yeah, and Dr. Hubner, if you could repeat the question, because I don't know that our director heard it either.
ballpark, how often do strength seclusions happen? Like for in a year?
So we report out at the end of every school year.
Jessica, can you come up to the mic? Thanks.
So we report out at the end of every school year how many restraints or seclusions per building, and so we report that to the DOE. You're asking how often. That is a tricky question to answer because sometimes that depends on student-specific information in terms of sometimes children have or students have difficulty in a period of time, so you may see a increased frequency 1 month, but then less. Does that make sense? So it's.
I'm looking more for years and more specifically, are we seeing any increase over time over the last few years?
So it's funny that you say that, and I can look into like the data from past years and get that to the superintendent so he can give you more specifics on that. What I will say is that the new RSA 126, Bob, you know this off the top of your head. Is it 126?
Now you put me on the spot.
I think it's RSA. The updated RSA 126 is the restraint and seclusion law that that was updated this past summer and into we got more and more information about it this fall. But really, that new RSA or that updated RSA really kind of continues to encourage that hands-off approach, and you see that more and more. So the trends over time, you do start to see a decrease because we're kind of we're having a more therapeutic and hands-off approach. So unless there's imminent danger to themselves or others, or there's significant safety concerns, oftentimes if a kid's dysregulated and maybe tearing, like in a classroom, and maybe throwing some things, if it's not impacting a kid, we're not putting hands on. And so those numbers year to year, like you've seen them trend down just because we're having a more hands-off approach. The other piece too is last year we determined that it would make sense to have CPI trainers. So we use crisis prevention intervention as our de-escalation and crisis intervention program, and we decided last year that it would behoove us to have trainers in both buildings. And so those trainers really oversee the teams, and our first line our first line of support is de-escalation always. And so we're continuing to kind of train our staff, all of our staff really, and we'll see that more coming in the spring, is that everyone's really going to be trained on the first part of CPI, which is really focused on de-escalation and calming and regulating students versus going in and putting hands on. Because what we know is oftentimes that more physical approach actually can be more triggering and dysregulating for kids. But I can get you those trend numbers. Yeah, and the training that we had our trainers engage in was also the CPI, but it was the trauma-informed. We really wanted to make sure it had a trauma-informed lens on it so that we were ensuring that it was a more therapeutic approach. You're welcome.
I have a question. Sorry. Are you only reporting to the state, or is there like a school form that's being filled out for restraint and seclusion?
Yeah.
Your own reporting?
That's a great question. So the DOE with this updated RSA had said that they were going to be putting out a form. That form came out late January, early February, and now it is a state standard form. Prior to that, districts created their own forms and kept their own data. We would just report out the aggregate at the end of the school year, meaning just not student specific, but just the number of how many. So now moving forward, we'll use the DOE's form. However, those are still housed here unless there's a request from the DOE to see those forms. And then we keep track in each building. There is a central file of those, and then we utilize that because the report is a restraint and seclusion report. So we ask staff to report both, and even just simple, anytime there's a physical incident, we're asking them to report it just so we have documentation.
ask if
And we're
you have
using
a-
the same form so that there's consistency around
Okay,
that.
so like physical contact wouldn't be separate, it would be part of this?
Yeah, it's part of that form. If they're using it from like a safety or an escort perspective. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Right.
The plan.
I'll make a motion to accept the Joint Loss Management Committee Safety and Health Plan.
Second. All those in favor?
Thank you.
Before voting, asking if there are any discussions. Thanks.
Okay, moving on here. The 2023-2024 Superintendent Evaluation Cycle. You should all have the CBIR document in your packet that gives an overview of the superintendent evaluation process. So number one is basically me as the chair directing the SAU to begin the superintendent evaluation process. For our new board members and for those at home, it starts with this 360 direct report feedback form that gets filled out. And Bob will conduct a self-evaluation. We'll go through rounds where the school board gives their assessment of the evaluation. And then no later than May 31st, we'll go into a non-public session to approve the written evaluations of the superintendent. And then by June 15th, the chair and the vice chair will meet with the superintendent and we'll review the evaluation directly with Bob. All right.
If I can. Sure.
Go ahead.
For the new board members, it might seem a little strange or unfair for you to evaluate the superintendent where you've been here for a total of an hour.
I couldn't approve the minutes, and you want me to evaluate them?
Yes. So know that this is something that's a constant, challenge every year when we get new board members, but it is to the best of your knowledge and ability. And don't feel compelled that you have to do every piece of the eval. If you don't, there's something you really can't judge. But some of this comes in as community members, not necessarily always working with the superintendent. So just be mindful of that.
But with that being said, I would encourage you to, get to know Bob and discuss and you bring your thoughts to him as much as possible. He's great. He's really transparent, and he'll answer any questions.
He's really not. No.
All right. Anything else beyond?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Moving on, the board liaison assignments. So every year we decide who's going to volunteer for these different job assignments. Just giving the new board members a little overview of each. So facilities would be working with Jeff Mackey, our facilities director, on updates on the buildings and everything having to do with the facilities and his day-to-day work. We have a representative for Hampstead Middle School, a representative for HCS, a student services representative, working closely with Jess and her team, technology. You'll see I was responsible for the vouchers last year, viewing all of the expenses coming in line by line. Very arduous process. The policy committee, reviewing any policy updates and bringing those to the board for review and approval. The safety committee, communication committee, and then finally, Carl already volunteered to be the New Hampshire SBA delegate.
You want to start with vouchers?
Sure. With vouchers, at the end of every month, go in and review that.
And then the policy committee is once a month. Board members have been, myself and Aaron have done it virtually. So it's for about 1 hour every third Tuesday, I believe, right, Melissa? If I remember right? Okay, I get it on my calendar. I just know I show up, and but it's for an hour that we review whatever policies are on the docket. Communication committee, there hasn't been too much to date. It's something I had thought about continuing. I know tonight we're not going to decide. This is for the next board meeting, but the communication committee is working with the town communication committee, and now that they've revised that, we'd be, I'd say, reinvesting in that. I'd say beyond the policy committee and the safety committee, I think the rest of them are, I'd say, ad hoc. They don't need to, they're not like you meet with Jeff Mackey every Monday at this time. It's up to the board member meeting with the administrator and deciding when they're going to meet and discuss or whatever that looks like. It's also important that when we get to the point that we do budgets later on in the year, in that October working meetings, typically those two members, the administrator and the board member, are working together going through the budgets and present out. So that's another activity and responsibility.
Yep.
Yeah, the safety committee's now, well, just to give you guys an idea of time commitments, some of them are once, a few of them are once a month, most of them are like kind of specific.
So.
All right. So yeah, look those over.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to point out that we did reconfigure the assignments because we added Wellness Committee. So if the board wants to flip to the other side of the paper,
Thank you.
we added that. So now we have 10 assignments as opposed to the usual 9 that board members are used to seeing.
Excellent.
That would be Mr. Dowd's question.
Quarterly. Okay. Moving on. In your packets, we have the first reading of some policies here. There are 6 policies for first reading. The first one being KCD, public gifts and donations. So this increases the amount from $5,000 to $20,000 of unanticipated revenue that a school board may accept without the need for 7-day notice and a public hearing. And then additionally, there's a suggested revision to increase the $500 threshold for the superintendent's authority to accept gifts in accordance with the policy, to increase that to $2,500. So go ahead and take a look at that one. Ask the board if there are any questions on that policy. Any discussion?
I don't know if we need to put it in the policy or not, but my only suggestion would be, I like what happens right now where Mr. Thompson will still bring it to us. It doesn't necessarily need a vote, but at least communication of.
I would agree.
Because I think it's important, no matter if it's $50 like earlier or it's $1,000, I think recognizing that we have a very generous community, and at times those community members should be discussed and formally thanked. So I'm not sure if board members would want that as part of a policy or not, but that's just my suggestion is anything not, if we go to $2,500, anything under $2,500 to have the superintendent formally communicate at the board meeting.
Yeah, I would agree, and I thought that we added a section that said notice will be provided to the board. Yeah, I think, okay, yep. Okay, I see, yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions on KCD before we move on to the next policy? Okay. Next policy is GBEAA, the confidential student information. So this is a recommended policy not on the books. This is a sample policy from the New Hampshire School Board Association, and it addresses the district's intent to respect privacy and confidentiality and PII, if you will, of all students.
It is, yes. So the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act is the law that governs the privacy of students in all schools. It's a federal law that the district is in compliance with. This is essentially a school board policy that affirms what is written in FERPA.
The irony.
So essentially what we're looking at here is not any additional requirements under what is already required under the law.
All right. Any other questions or comments on GBEAA? Okay. Moving on to policy BBBC, board member or district officer resignation. So this is a suggested revision that outlines a more detailed process when boards are faced with a resignation.
Not necessarily. This one is just, if I remember right, I'm going through it right now. Right, right. So no, I have not resigned yet, but if that's what you're asking. Oh, sorry. No, I'm kidding.
Right. Any other questions or comments from the board on BBBC? All right, next is BBBE, unexpired term fulfillment. Revisions include definition and occurrences of a vacancy, authority to fill a vacancy, including a moderator vacancy, the duration of appointment, and process by which the board may follow to fill a vacancy. Thanks, Dr. Hodner. All right. Any questions from the board on that one? Okay. Next.
Sorry, I'm just reading it over. It's just, sorry, Andre. Reading on page 2E, just talking about this, because this is something Dr. Hubner is referencing. When we did this a few years ago, the second paragraph, discussion by the board of the process to be used to fill a vacancy in the appointment process itself, including candidate interviews, shall occur in public session during a duly noticed meeting. I'm not sure if we need to put this in here, but what we did was we went into a non-public because what we went into a non-public because what we were discussing was, I forget the exact reason for non-public, but it was essentially the discussions of a public person who's not a voted official that could have a negative impact on their
Reputation.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's part of it. Discussion regarding candidate and discussions like we have.
Got it.
Yeah, prior to their appointment, you could go into non-public. After they're appointed, you couldn't.
Should we say something about non-public? I don't see it in here, it's the only possible exception to public, or it's just something saying going into non-public? You can just spell that out just a little bit more clearly.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So I don't see it. It says the only possible exception to what? Would be limited discussion. I just think something in there should say non-public.
Mm-hmm. So can you phrase that?
Yeah, I'd say something, I would strike the beginning of that. Instead of saying the only possible exception could be limited discussion regarding a potential candidate, I would say the board may go into non-public for a limited discussion. You want me to send that to you, Melissa? Or is that...
I have it.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I appreciate it.
All right. Any other questions or comments on BBBE? Okay, moving on, JEB, age of entrance. Last revised in 2001. There are no updates to this. It is basically just reaffirming this as a district policy.
I do have a question about this, actually. This is a question I was asked on the night of kindergarten here at Central School. Actually, it was at the meet the community members at the library. Is there an exception process of if a student celebrates their 6th year after September 30th?
Yes, and that is outlined in the policy specific to grade 1 students. So that last paragraph, David, I think gives you the answer to your question. But I will tell you where this does come up as an issue.
Okay.
So the age of entrance policy provides the superintendent with some authority to make an exception that is specific to grade 1. There is not in the policy an exception to kindergarten. In the absence of policy language, the discretion to make those decisions is given to the superintendent. So there isn't necessarily a need for us to change the policy to reflect that. I was not here in 2001 when this policy was last updated.
Slacker.
I assumed that the decision to leave out language around an exception had to do with the fact that the district was either only offered pre-K or there wasn't consideration for full-day kindergarten. I would suggest with the adoption of universal full-day kindergarten that the policy committee take up the age of entrance if they believe they would like to create an exception. Right now, I do have parents that come to me to ask for an exception to kindergarten. I give it some consideration, but to be truthful, to allow an exception for someone under the age requirement, when we have an extensive waiting list every year of students who do meet the age requirements, makes it difficult to make an exception to the policy.
So for this one, my opinion on this, board members, is I don't think we need to wait until there's full-day universal kindergarten. I think there should be something in place already for this, because we are going towards being able to provide more full day, right? Not saying we're going to go towards universal yet. I mean, I think a lot of us hope that that happens. But either way, I don't think we need to wait for that to put that in the policy.
I would agree that there should be language that kind of spells out any sort of exception that we might take.
And all it would take would be, I believe, would be to take the sentence that is in the second to last paragraph, the last sentence, such placement is tentative and subject to the reassignment by the superintendent of schools and his or her designee. If we copy that language and add that to the second paragraph, a student may enter kindergarten, then I think we're covered. I interpret the policy as such, but to your point, it's not literally stated.
Right. So I think that it would be good to do that for this policy.
Right.
Board members?
I agree. I don't think, no, I think I don't believe it has to go back to policy. I believe we can make that.
I think that we can make a motion to accept and pass the second reading with modifications.
Yeah.
Because right now we've got 2 modifications already. So this would be a third one.
So do you want to?
Melissa, do you agree that's what we've done in the past, or do we usually kick any changes back to the policy committee?
I don't think we have to kick it back to policy, but it's an option. We could do that, or the board could agree now to move the policy as amended per the discussion to second read.
Okay.
So that when you get to the next meeting, April 9th, you'll see it changed per the results of this meeting. Does that make, did I explain that correctly?
Yeah. Okay.
And David, you said that there were 3 amendments? I got
Yeah.
the one from,
The first one that, going back to it,
was that the public gifts one?
yes. To add language in there that the superintendent will communicate all gifts under $2,500 to the board members.
Yeah, I was thinking about that after you had that conversation. I wanted to point something out. I think that if you look back on page 1 of 2 for KCD,
Yep.
the 1, 2, 3, the 4th paragraph down where it talks about for recognition purposes, the superintendent or designee will notify the board at a regular school board meeting or by written means when necessary of all gifts in the amount of $250 or more. So you're saying to just say of all gifts?
Yes.
I think the reason we did $250 or more is only because this policy on the last page speaks about voluntary contributions, which the superintendent might not be always aware of. Those voluntary contributions that talks about by district employees or supplies or other minor items of personal property to be used in classrooms. Am I incorrect, Superintendent, that you
No,
might not?
that is correct. I think the challenge is that there are a lot of donations that are made to classrooms by parents that never cross my desk. Typically, the ones that do are monetary donations.
Yep.
And my concern with removing the language would be that that is a real high bar
Bring
for
a
me to
dollar
report to
every
you
month.
every time, someone donates smocks to Mr. Torelli's art class.
Right. Okay.
So
I apologize for not bringing it up right away. I just thought of it after the conversation
I
happened.
remember, that there was some language in there and stuff.
Okay.
And I think, just the procedure should be that you should notify as much as possible. But
Exactly.
Okay.
just do the policies.
Okay.
Right. So age of entrance, we are taking, Mr. Smith, we're taking that such placement is tentative and subject to reassignment by the superintendent of schools or his or her designee and adding that sentence to the second paragraph?
As long as the other board members think that that's, the right way to go.
I fully support
Yep.
So that sentence will just be repeated again
It would.
in the following paragraph at the end?
On the second paragraph, yep.
Yes, it'd be in the second.
Under kindergarten.
Oh, the kindergarten. Thank you.
All right. And our last policy, FEB, is the selection of the architect. So this has to do with the policy to hold open competition when selecting an architect for a school project.
For this, we're just reconfirming it. We haven't.
Yes, this is a reaffirmation.
I would like to make a motion for policies to second reading
So moved. Second.
Didn't you second?
I'll second that.
I thought you'd second
I
it.
said so moved, but I will second that.
Okay, sorry.
Any other comments from the board? Questions or comments? All in favor? Okay. Board comments and correspondence. Looks like we don't have any. Mr.
So the New Hampshire state minimum standards, which New Hampshire 306 is. So it's weird because it's showing up on.
Want to speak into it?
I want to hear.
So the New Hampshire Commission for Education is looking at doing significant changes to the New Hampshire 306 standards. The hearing is on April 3rd from 1 to 4:30 for the public. Including in this is removing any class size limits, removing from state policy that we should be meeting the instructional needs of each individual student. There are also significant other changes. I'd probably say about a third of the minimum standards are being rewritten. There were public information sessions, but there's no recording of them. And from my understanding and from my investigation, there hasn't really been a public discussion about this. And the newest version was released about a month ago, about halfway through February. And I can forward the website changes to this. I just found out about this about 3 weeks ago. It would not change what we would do in this district, but it would change what school districts are required throughout the state. And I had emailed the New Hampshire School Board Association, gotten some correspondence back from them, but they are not doing any sort of webinar yet or any sort of notifications on what's going on. I will definitely keep you guys posted as I learn more stuff, and I can give you guys, I'll send out information to the board. But I just think it is something, it is a significant change in the policy direction at the state level, and it could impact how much the state gives in aid to each individual district. So it's something that I think we need to be aware of, even though it may not specifically change our direction as a board at the local level. It does free up local boards to go in more different directions if they wanted to, but it also may change the financial implications for state funding as well. So I just wanted you guys to make aware of it, because I was rather surprised that being on a school board and being an administrator in a large district, I heard nothing about this until about 3 weeks ago. So I'll forward that information on to you guys.
I appreciate that. Any other board correspondence, comments from anyone on the board? Okay. At this point, we will move to the consent agenda with Mr. Thompson.
Great, thank you. So personnel report, there is no personnel report this evening. There is a list of open positions on our website. I also emailed that to parents today. We're fortunate right now that we don't have a lot of professional open positions. But you know, for those individuals at home that are thinking about working at a school, please feel free to reach out. Moving on to the superintendent's report, I'm going to highlight a couple of things that we already talked about just because they're definitely worth repeating. And number one was the visit by the therapy dog. I got to tell you, I am now a firm believer that both of our schools need, if not one, but multiple therapy animals based upon what I saw. this dog, Lana, is that the name? Lana? And thank you, Jessica, for helping to facilitate this. Just to see how well-trained this animal is, it can identify individuals that they think might be in need of like a hug. It can sense when humans are in distress. It seeks them out, and I got to witness this firsthand. It's also a tremendous entry point for a conversation with a kid. So we're standing up at the top of the 8th grade hallway, and every kid that walked through the hallway that saw that dog came over and pet the dog. It was really transformative, and I was there for like 15 or 20 minutes. It's yet another step that we need to take to really ensure that we are looking out for the mental health and well-being of all of our staff and all of our students. So it's one thing, it's not the solution. And it's amazing when we start to have this conversation with staff, how many staff members are willing to have their dog certified as a therapy animal just so that they could bring them to work. We will have, so this bringing Lana to school was part of let's try this out. Let's see how this works. Obviously, there's a lot more controls and other things that would need to go in place for us to do this. But this is something that we do plan to move forward with based upon what we saw last week. I also just want to comment, I was able to attend the movie trailer premiere. It was just amazing. Not only the quality of the student work, it's amazing to think that, for better or for worse, we know that students have the technology in their hands. They're making lots of videos already. When we channel that power for good to make something that has educational value, the product that these students created was really top-notch. I would go see some of these movies if they were to be made. I thought they were that good. I also had the opportunity on Friday to go to the 3rd grade field trip to Pinkerton. They visit the environmental science program. This is year 2 of creating more experiences for our students to attend Pinkerton. I wasn't able to attend last year, and I was fortunate to be able to go this year and realized this isn't just them going for maple sugaring. It's not just a visit to the sugar shack. It is a deep dive into their environmental science program. So the kids filter through various stations, and the instructors are the students. And we're really talking about engaging in meaningful instruction. So to see, and some of these were our Hampstead students, to see them instructing some of our kids, the level of engagement, the activities, was just really impressive. We need to create more of these opportunities. We know that. And again, how great when we get to a place where every grade has an experience like that with the school that they're going to show up to in their freshman year. Like, let's not make that, the first or second time that they've been there, right? I didn't have the opportunity to attend the HCS versus the HMS dodgeball game, but I am told that it was absolutely amazing. A lot of really healthy competition between the two schools. Ultimately, the middle school won, but it sounds like they're already plotting like what the next event is. It's just great to see how many people. Yeah, pickleball. Okay, all right. So pickleball is next, and I welcome the opportunity to attend that one. And then finally, I just wanted to thank all of our parents who have become vetted volunteers to be able to go to be a lunch buddy, to see the parents going into schools. In fact, we've actually been recruiting some people to come substitute and serve in other volunteer capacities. It's great. I know the volunteer process, that vetting is a little bit cumbersome, but once you get it done, it's done. And for the duration of your time in the Hampstead schools as a parent, that background check and that vetting is good. And please know that that step that we ask you to take is us wanting to keep all of the students in our schools safe. It is amazing to think that we now have approximately over 100 vetted volunteers, people that we know and can trust to interact with our kids. So the other piece, I just wanted to turn it over very quickly to Mrs. Tomaselli, who's going to talk about a yet another grant opportunity that the district is looking to pursue.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to the board. So I wanted to speak to you tonight about a Student Assistance Program grant, an SAP grant. We learned about this opportunity a few weeks ago, actually probably about maybe 3 months ago now. This is from an organization called JSI. It's pretty widely known around the state. So we've been working on this application for a few weeks. We have a deadline to submit of April 1st. The unique aspect of this particular grant is that it requires a 25% match or an in-kind use of funds to support this position. We would use this grant money to hire an SAP professional that would be housed here in the middle school. It's a middle school, high school grant, so of course with us it would land at the middle school. So we did meet actually today to finalize some details of the budget because we'd have to figure out FICA, retirement, all of the fringe benefits, all of that. But this student assistance professional, more importantly to all of you, you should know that this person will work with our at-risk students in a Tier 2 and possibly Tier 3 setting. And they have a very important role. They would have an important role in our MTSSB work. So that would be involved in meetings as well as preparing for Tier 1 school-wide teaching of prevention measures. If we are selected as a grant recipient, I will likely be having to come back to the school board to get approval to accept the grant funding. Would be looking for 1 FTE salary and benefits as well as some extra funding for professional learning opportunities and licensure for that individual, supplies that would be used for community and family outreach events as well as classroom type materials. So that's kind of in the works and it's very exciting. I think we are trying to respond as best we can to changing needs and looking for support, and I'm very excited to find grant opportunities like this out there for us.
Can you speak a little bit more to the 25% match and kind of what that means?
So the way it's worded is it says a 25% match or in-kind use of time. So the district needs to commit, a lot of the grants we apply for are competitive or not competitive and just look at your application. This one, it's hard to tell if it's competitive or not, but what they're looking for is how committed is your district to owning this position moving forward. So even though you can get this particular grant multiple years in a row, you do need to demonstrate that first year a 25% commitment. And beyond that, the first year, the application's pretty straightforward. It's years 2 and 3 where it gets a little bit more complicated with outcomes and how are you utilizing this position to better your school. So.
And how do we demonstrate that commitment in that
That's
first
going
year?
to be interesting. Given the law around non-academic surveying, we will not be surveying without notice to parents any students on non-academic topics. But we can certainly measure impact in other ways. We can look at attendance, we can look at Tier 1 programming, we can look at MTSSB process without delving into student private topics.
Great.
Any questions?
How are you tracking your MTSSB stuff right now?
That's a really good question. So our MTSS work is really just rolling out this year, and we've admittedly focused a lot more on MTSSA, looking at data, having regular interval meetings. We do have, each building has an MTSSB committee as well as a district committee, and those are still very much in development. We are looking at school-wide prevention programming, but as far as trickling into Tier 2 and Tier 3, there's still a lot of work to be done. We do have students who are identified getting Tier 3 supports, but we have plenty of work to do to really grow our Tier 2. Having said that, we do have some wonderful placeholders in our schedule. We have advisory, so every child at the middle school has advisory every single day, and at Central School we now have morning meetings every single day in the schedule built in. Those are universally known to be very helpful in terms of MTSS work for all. So I'm pretty proud of that. We also have a flex arrangement here at the middle school, so students can go into different flex groups. Every few weeks, they get redistributed into their grade level, and those are needs-based groups.
Will we get an update as a board in the future about other initiatives and what you guys are doing?
Absolutely, yep. And that will either come from me or from the building principals, depending on what the events look like. I could talk about flex groups for a minute. There were some events today. I don't know if you.
Yeah, real quick,
briefly.
yeah.
So actually, along the lines of flex groups today, there were two really significant multi-age events that took place today. At the middle school, actually, Lori Lynn Griffin's middle school flex group, which is called a Boys in STEM class, visited Miss Lazaro's second grade class today. And they read fictional stories to them. Each story had a problem, and then they worked together in little pairs to design a STEM-based solution to that problem. It was just incredibly endearing, and like the little friendships, they just click so quickly. It was so nice to see some of our seventh grade boys, like, getting on the floor and doing the welcome song with the second graders and then drawing. A little bit later in the day, I was able to visit Miss Bonell and Mrs. Mayu's 5th and 6th grade reading flex, and they hosted something called Hampstead Stories, which I'm sure you'll see on our social media sites in the next few days. So they hosted many local, I'm going to say local historians. These were representatives from all over town. The former police chief was here, the former fire chief was here, Rob Morris was here, a bunch of people from the library, and the children prepared questions, and basically it was like a living archive of Hampstead's history. So they prepared questions and then answered, and it was a beautiful roundtable format, and just so nice to see multi-age interactions happening. I feel like it's enjoyable to watch, and it's really impressive to see the soft skills that the children are developing. And when we talk about assessments, these are the things that we can't quantify necessarily, but you know it when you see it. And the kids did a beautiful job. So thank you so much to all the volunteers who came in today.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
I love the fact that we're still doing the Sugar Shack, because I did that 35 years ago. It was a tradition for a long time, so it's awesome.
So that, do you want to add an item?
I do, just two quick things. One, because we were able to review the budget and the warrant and all of that, I have our return for the Department of Revenue Administration, which is the MS-22, which is here. So I'll pass that down. If you wouldn't mind, there's a summary of our vote, and what this form does for our new members is commemorates what our voters actually voted on voting day and commemorates our budget and that sort of thing. And to cap the night off in a very good way, I think, our GMR, our guaranteed maximum rate for our insurance, was given to us for a budget number of 25%. Our actual came in, I believe, today at 21.1%. So I'll have a fiscal impact on that. Not now, though. We have a very odd, we have a cost share differentiation that I need to work through for HEA, where if the increase is greater than 10%, they'll split the difference with us. So I like to run those numbers and make sure they're absolutely correct before providing that. So good stuff.
And, Mr. Dowd doesn't like it when I commit our district funds, but think of it like this. The question came up about that like-kind contribution of 25% for the SAP position. The money that we will recoup, that we budgeted for, could go to cover something like that. Because the insurance number will exceed what we'd need to fund the 25% of the SAP position grant, should we receive it.
Hopefully, quick question there, Mr. Dowd. The 25% that we were quoted before equated to approximately how much money that we budgeted?
I think it's for $4 million.
Sorry?
Let me get the number for you. Hold on, give me a minute. Seeing it earlier, I didn't want to quote it. I was going through, and it was not clear. Yeah. Go to $1 million increase? Yeah. So we'll go with $1 million increase.
$1 million, right?
Yep.
So if we're at 21%, which is take about 4% off of that, so we're looking at, how much is that? I can't do the math real quick. I've been up too late, too early.
We're splitting some of that with HEA, though.
Got it.
So it's the entire split that changes.
Yep. Okay.
So normally, let's just say 88, 22 for the district.
Yep.
The employee's share would go up based on the fact that it's over 10%.
Yep.
Means our share goes down.
Okay.
So I'd really like to tweak those numbers because it does
Okay.
have a very big
Yeah.
impact.
So you'll bring that to us at the next board
Yep.
meeting? All right. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments to Superintendent Thompson? Okay. At this point, we are going to go into a non-public. So we'll go ahead and make a motion to go into non-public under RSA 91A3, paragraph D, consideration of the acquisition, sale, or lease of real or personal property, and under paragraph K, consideration by a school board of entering into a student or pupil tuition contract.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
I don't think we'll be coming out of non-public with a vote, so for those at home, don't have to wait up. Is that a correct statement, or do you think we'll be voting? Some of it, we're unsure, some of the discussion.
Yeah, we might come out with a vote relative to 91A-K, student tuition agreement.
Okay.
Can the board take that vote, Melissa, in non-public?
Yes, they can.
They can, okay, then no, we will not need to go back into public.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So other than that, no questions.
Right.
Who had the second on that motion? I missed it. Dr. Hubner?
Dr. Hubner. And all those in favor of going into a non-public?
Melissa has to take roll call.
Can I take roll call vote?
Yep.
Ms. Denton?
Yes.
Dr. Hubner?
Yes.
Mr. Cabarrus?
Yes.
Mr. Poor?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Motion carries. The time is 9:20.
Point of order, it's Dr. Poor.
Fancy pants.
Don't worry about it.